Can the Minister outline what further support we can offer companies like Cranfield Aerospace in my constituency to make sure we capture that economic benefit locally in the future?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I share the honourable member's pride in the wonderful work done by Cranfield and Cranfield Aerospace. We're providing £1.6 billion of funding for the UK's 9 catapults, including the high-value manufacturing catapults, some of which will go to the Cranfield Digital Aviation Research and Technology Centre, and I hope to join the honourable member in visiting that wonderful institution.
James Gray.
Speaker, the Minister is new to his task, a very wide portfolio it is. And in the wall-to-wall briefings he's currently getting, will he particularly ask for briefings on science, British science, in the Arctic and the Antarctic? We have 78 universities who are leading in this field. We are the 4th largest polar scientific research nation. We are a leader in it. He needs to know all about it.
Mr. Speaker, I know that my honourable friend, the member for North Wiltshire, does fantastic work highlighting the work of polar research through the all-party parliamentary group. I'll be happy to champion that and to meet with him on this important domain for science.
Minister Chiamwara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I welcome the Minister to his role? I hope he will share his predecessors' enthusiasm for and commitment to science. Climate change presents huge challenges and huge opportunities. Labour would champion university clusters and spin-outs as engines of sustainable regional growth. But right now, great green job-creating businesses like Low Carbon Materials, a Durham University spin-out, or AirX, an award-winning retrofit startup, are bogged down by Tory red tape, with some new products subject to 11 different regulators. Will he adopt Labour's proposal for a regulatory innovation office to unblock the system, end damaging uncertainty and drive much-needed growth?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable lady for Newcastle Central. I look forward to working collaboratively with her, and I absolutely share my predecessor's determination to drive forward British science, including the all-important work in net zero.
To Topical's Dame Priti Patel.
Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this week the Secretary of State is building on the momentum from the AI Summit by meeting with key partners and policymakers in the United States, championing Britain's leading global role in AI, space, tech, online safety, quantum and other areas. It is only 2 weeks ago that Britain convened 28 countries and the European Union at Bletchley Park to sign the world's first agreement on tackling the risks of frontier AI. This followed the historic passage of the Online Safety Act, which has been viewed across the world as the gold standard of online child safety legislation. The Secretary of State will be consolidating and accelerating Britain's global advantage in these priority areas, ensuring that the special relationship grows even stronger when it comes to science and technology, and that the collaboration between our two countries...
Patel!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend will know that the planned retirement of the public switched telephone network in 2025 is going to bring very significant concerns across rural communities, in particular in Essex, and he'll be familiar with this. So can he provide some assurance about the work underway between the government and telecommunications providers to help improve services in Essex, particularly where we have poor broadband connectivity?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I suggested earlier, the retirement of the PSTN land network is a decision for the industry, but government does have a key role to play in ensuring vulnerable consumers are protected through the transition. I have regular meetings to discuss with communications providers and Ofcom the progress on that, but with regard to Essex and my constituency neighbours hers, I share her concern about the need to ensure that vulnerable constituents are protected, and I can assure her that I will continue.
Rwanda Shadow Minister, can I say, we've about 7 minutes. I don't want to use up the time, but the Minister's really got to be a bit more cautious in how much time he's using. Matt Rodder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has said that terrorist groups could use AI to build chemical or biological weapons. But he's still failed to act decisively to regulate AI, even though the US and EU are both taking action. So can the Minister tell the House whether the Secretary of State is using her current trip to the US to learn from the Biden administration, or will our country have to put up with yet more dither and delay?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government has always been clear that we will have a contextual and proportionate response when it comes to AI. But I spoke to the Secretary of State yesterday. It is very clear the US sees us as global leaders and they'll be working with us.
Matt Vickers.
Speaker, Teesside was built on steel, and now, thanks to Ben Hoochin, British Steel are bringing steelmaking back to Teesside. Green steel will be forged thanks to a new £1.25 billion arc furnace, leading the way in decarbonising our industries and bringing high-skilled jobs. Does my right honourable friend agree that any business looking to invest in green tech and energy in the UK should be looking to Teesside first?
Mr. Speaker, Teesside's a wonderful net zero powerhouse and I commend the Green Steel project. That's one reason why Teesside was chosen to pilot the Innovate UK Launchpads programme, each of which will receive up to £7.5 million.
SNP spokesperson Carol Monaghan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I welcome the new front bench to their positions. Mr. Speaker, since November 2020, £1.1 billion of taxpayers' money has been invested in the Rosalind Franklin Institute as a mega lab to defend Britain against future pandemics. Can one of the new front bench explain why the mega lab has now been put up for sale?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This government is investing records amount in innovation and research and technology, including across the life sciences sector. I'll happily meet with the Honourable Lady to discuss this in more detail.
Andy Carter.
What impact does the Minister think the passage of the Online Safety Act into law will have for children and families in Warrington South and across the country?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a father, this issue concerns me greatly. The Online Safety Act is the most powerful child protection law in a generation. All in-scope companies will need to take robust steps to protect children from illegal content and activity on their services. Those safety measures will need to protect children from harmful and age-inappropriate content and activity, such as bullying and content that promotes eating disorders and self-harm.
Gregory Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Minister help to coordinate a comprehensive analysis of the most successful enterprise zones across the UK and ways in which those zones that haven't been as successful can maximise the opportunities such zones would provide, such as in my constituency in Coleraine?
Minister.
Well, the honourable gentleman is absolutely right to flag the value that successful enterprise zones can bring to local communities. I want to see DSIT sectors benefiting as well, and I'm happy to coordinate further with colleagues in other departments to explore those opportunities.
Elliot Colbert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the revolution in AI, can I please ask my right honourable friend what steps he is taking to ensure young people in Carshalton and Wallington have access to the skills that they need for the future?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's committed to ensuring the UK has talent that supports research and innovation and drives growth. That's why we are investing millions in the brightest researchers through scholarships, PhD placements and fellowships in technologies like AI and quantum.
Oh, Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What are ministers doing to ensure that members of this House are not included in disinformation reports compiled by the Counter-Disinformation Unit in their department simply for being critical of the government? Their own backbenchers are particularly interested to know.
Minister.
Well, I can tell the honourable gentleman that the Counter-Disinformation Unit is there to flag to platforms potentially misleading information, but it has no power to have it removed, and I can give him an assurance that it does not identify any members of this House or professional journalists.
Peter Aldis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Research and development tax credits have been remarkably successful in promoting investment by SMEs. However, the Suffolk Chamber of Commerce have highlighted the system has ground to a halt due to HMRC's sledgehammer approach to tackling fraud. Can my right honourable friend liaise with HMRC and the Treasury to ensure that a more pragmatic approach is adopted?
My honourable friend is a champion for his constituency, and I'm very happy to speak to the Financial Secretary to Treasury on that important matter on his behalf.
We now come to Prime Minister's questions. I start with Richard Thomason.
Number one, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, at the start of this year, I made halving inflation my #1 priority. Today, we have delivered on that commitment. remains more to do, but this is a strong step forward. This morning also the Supreme Court gave a judgment on the Rwanda plan. They confirmed that the principle of removing asylum seekers to a safe third country is lawful. There are further elements that they want additional certainty on, and noted that changes can be delivered in the future to address those issues. The government has been working already on a new treaty with Rwanda, and we will finalise that in light of today's judgment. And furthermore, if necessary, I am prepared to revisit our domestic legal frameworks. Let me assure the House, my commitment to stopping the boats is unwavering. My right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, will be making an oral statement shortly to the House. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the Prime Minister took office, he promised to lead a government marked by integrity, professionalism and accountability at every level. What is it about the judgment of David Cameron and his relationships with Lex Greenhill, or his lobbying for Chinese state interests, that make the Prime Minister consider him to be a suitable candidate to be the Foreign Secretary?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted that the former Prime Minister has rejoined government as Foreign Secretary. He brings unrivalled experience and relationships across the world and will do a fantastic job championing British interests everywhere he goes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tackling illegal immigration is a crucial issue for my constituents, many of whom will be extremely disappointed at this morning's judgment from the Supreme Court. Is the Prime Minister able to update the House on what this decision means for the government's plan to tackle illegal immigration?
Prime Minister.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for his question? I know he has championed this issue and it matters to his constituents. As I said, the judgment confirms that the principle of removing asylum seekers to a safe third country is lawful. The government has already been working in advance on a new treaty with Rwanda, which we will finalise in light of today's judgment, so to address the challenges that were raised. But let me say this again. If it becomes clear that our domestic legal frameworks or international conventions are still frustrating plans at that point, I am prepared to change our laws and revisit those international relationships. The British people expect us to do whatever it takes to stop the boats, and that is precisely what this government will deliver.
I come the leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister obviously thinks so little of his own MPs that he's had to peel David Cameron away from his 7-year exile in a shepherd's hut and make him Foreign Secretary. But a few months ago, the Intelligence and Security Committee said that the now Foreign Secretary's role in a Chinese investment fund may have been, and this is their words, engineered by the Chinese state. I hardly need to remind the Prime Minister of the threat posed by the Chinese Communist Party or the intimidation against members of this House. So when will he instruct the Foreign Secretary to give full public disclosure of his work for Chinese interests?
Mr. Speaker, as I said, I'm delighted that the former Prime Minister has rejoined government as Foreign Secretary. As an individual with unrivalled experience, he will help Britain navigate an uncertain world in challenging times. Of course, like every other government minister, he will go through the normal process with the independent advisor. But the government's position on China is clear. China represents an epoch-defining challenge. That's why we have taken strong and robust steps to protect ourselves against the risk that it poses. But we'll take no lessons, Mr. Speaker, from the Labour Party on protecting our national security. They've taken almost £700,000 from an alleged Chinese agent.
Mr. Speaker,
It's not... Sorry? Yes, I think now you're on the front bench. We need to just calm down. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, for someone who spent the last few weeks complaining about recycling bins, it's ironic that his latest reset involves recycling the architects of 13 years of Tory failure. But this is the Prime Minister who also reanimated the career of the member for Fareham in order to resuscitate his own just days after she was sacked for a national security breach. Is he ashamed that he was so desperate to become Tory leader, so scared to face a vote, that he put someone so totally unfit for office in charge of Britain's national security?
Mr. Speaker, he mentions 13 years. We remember what happened at the beginning of that 13 years. It was this party that restored this country's financial security after the Labour Party left no money behind, Mr. Speaker. And it is a bit rich to take lectures on security from a man who wanted to make the former member for Islington North Prime Minister of our country.
The member for Islington North isn't even a Labour MP anymore. A changed party and strong leadership. Mr.
Speaker. Luke, with a lot of business today, very important business with some important votes, and I want to get through this speedily. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, for 13 years our security has been undermined by this Tory government, and now the most ridiculous, pathetic spectacle of all. His Rwanda scheme, cooked up with his National Security Threat Home Secretary, has blown up. He was told over and over again that this would happen, that it wouldn't work, and it was just the latest Tory gimmick. But he bet everything on it, and now he's totally exposed. The central pillar of his government has crumbled beneath him. Does he want to apologise to the country for wasting £140 million of taxpayer cash and wasting his entire time in office?
Mr. Speaker, obviously the person officer didn't hear what I said about our approach to Rwanda, and not least when it comes to stopping the boats. Rwanda is one part of our plan which has already delivered a reduction in the number of small boats this year by a third, Mr. Speaker. But he talks about apologising. He talks about the former member not being a Labour MP now. Yes, he wasn't a Labour MP when he declined 15 different times to say that Hamas was a terrorist organisation this week, which is shameful. But he was a Labour MP. Indeed, the honourable gentleman served with him. He told the country he would make a great Prime Minister. At that point, he described Hamas as friends. Does he want to apologise for that now?
Are we serious? No. Because I'm going to tell you... Oh, I wouldn't challenge. Because I've got to say, our constituents are watching this. They're very, very concerned about the affairs of today. They're very concerned about the votes later. A lot of members wish to speak. Those who don't want that to happen, please, go outside, go and have a conversation there. You want to bawl and shout, do it elsewhere. But it won't be happening in here today. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I'm so glad he agrees this is a changed Labour Party. And while he was wasting his time on this gimmick, the asylum backlog has swollen to 175,000 people. Taxpayers are paying £8 million a day on hotel bills, and 615 people arrived by small boat last Sunday alone. Plan A has failed. And after this session, whether he likes it or not, he'll have to go back to his office, back to the drawing board, and start from scratch. Can he assure the British public that he will drop what his former Home Secretary calls his magical thinking and start treating small boat crossings with the seriousness that they deserve?
Mr. Speaker, he talks about a changed Labour Party. Perhaps we'll see that this evening. He can't even make his party do the right thing when it comes to standing by Israel in the vote later today. He talks about taking small boats crossing seriously. He's opposed every single measure that we have taken, Mr. Speaker. Again, let me update him on what we've done this year. The number of illegal Albania arrivals down by 90%. 20,000 people returned this year. The number of crossings down by a third. He mentioned hotels, closing 50 of them. Money being saved for taxpayers. All, by the way, opposed by the party opposite. What is the honourable gentleman's plan? Yes, there we have it. A cosy deal with the EU, which would see the UK accept 100,000 illegal migrants. He doesn't want to stop the boats. He wants to welcome more of them.
Mr. Speaker, it's very straightforward. He promised that he would stop the boats this year. This year. Today is the 15th of November. He's wasted all of his time on a gimmick, and now he's absolutely nowhere. Will he level with the British public and finally admit he's failed to deliver on his promise?
Mr. Speaker, this government has done more to tackle illegal migration than any in the past. And again, let's just review, Mr. Speaker. He's been on the wrong side of this issue his entire career. This is a man who described all immigration law as racist. He said it was a mistake to control immigration, and he has never once in this place voted for stricter asylum rules. It's clear, Mr. Speaker, while he might want to listen to the open border activists, I'm siding with the British people.
I would have thought if he was confident about his promise, he would have given an answer saying he stands by it and will deliver by the end of the year. Yeah. But the absence of that answer is absolutely amazing in the circumstances. He's had 3 reshuffles, a forgotten conference speech, an empty King speech. Yeah. He even found time to fanboy Elon Musk. But not one of them has made the slightest difference to the lives of working people. If we had £1 for every time we had a reset, the cost of living crisis would be over long ago. Now, he likes to think of himself as the man from Silicon Valley, the tech-savvy Californian, the country's first AI PM. And yet his big idea is to keep turning his government on and off and hope at the wall and hope that we'll see signs of life. Is he starting to feel that, as somebody once said, he was the future once?
I slightly missed the end of that, but I've got to say, I was glad to hear finally the honourable gentleman did bring up the cost of living, because on that he is right. That is the #1 challenge facing countries up and down the family. And today, again, he mentioned it, but what he failed to recognise, and he talked about delivering on promises, today was a day that we delivered on the most important pledge I make to halve inflation, Mr. Speaker. Delivering on a commitment, easing the burden for families up and down the country. What we would see from the party opposite is everything would jeopardise that progress, borrowing £28 billion a year, undermining our energy security, giving in to inflation-busting pay rises to his union backers. That's not a sensible plan, Mr. Speaker. It would push up mortgage rates, push up inflation, harm working families. All the while, we're going to continue delivering for the country.
And now for something completely different, question 4.
We are. Prime Minister.
Oh, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure my honourable friend will be delighted that the West Midlands now tops regional rankings for foreign direct investment. The government is also significantly investing in the region, including hundreds of millions of pounds for Levelling Up Fund and Towns Fund investments, and introducing a new pilot scheme to help businesses in the region become more energy efficient.
Sir Michael.
Well, can I thank my right honourable friend for that encouraging answer? And on behalf of my constituents in Lichfield, may I thank him for having the guts to actually stop HS2. But can I ask that the area within my constituency in the north, where construction is still going on, that this happens swiftly, and that those areas which are not going to have HS2, compensation is also made swiftly to those people who are expecting it.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for his question, but also for his consistent campaigning on this issue, and I recall his last question at Prime Minister's Questions on this very topic. I'd like to reassure him that we are committed to fair treatment for people affected by the changes, whilst also protecting taxpayers appropriately. Wherever property has been acquired for HS2, property owners have been fully compensated, and any outstanding cases will be settled. We are developing a programme to sell the surplus land on HS2 Phase 2 and ensure that it delivers value for money, does not disrupt local property markets, and I'll ensure that the Royal Minister talks and meets with him swiftly on behalf of his constituents.
MP Leader Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, in 2010, the then Prime Minister and now Foreign Secretary David Cameron said that people in Gaza are living under constant attacks and pressure in an open-air prison. Does the current Prime Minister not agree that if there is not an immediate ceasefire, then all of us in this chamber will be watching on as that open-air prison is turned into a graveyard?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, no one can deny the suffering that the people in Gaza are undergoing at the moment. I spoke about this on Monday, and I spoke about it consistently with Mahmoud Abbas, the President of the Palestinian Authority, which is why we're doing everything we can to get aid into the region, and we have repeatedly and consistently called for humanitarian pauses to get aid in and to get hostages and those that need to get out, foreign nationals, as quickly as possible, and will continue, as the Foreign Secretary will do, to make sure that that happens.
Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, how much worse does it need to get? 4,609 children are already dead in Gaza. Babies in the neonatal intensive care unit are dying because they don't have access to oxygen. For members across the House, this is a question of values and it is a question of conscience. So does the Prime Minister not agree that should there be a vote on an immediate ceasefire, that members across the House should be afforded a free vote?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, our position as a government is clear on this. It's right that Israel is able to defend itself, and that principle is one which we support. It has suffered an appalling terrorist attack. Hamas is a terrorist organisation, and it is not just Israel's right but duty to protect its citizens. At the same time, we have consistently at the United Nations and bilaterally with all our partners called for humanitarian pauses to ensure that more aid can get in, hostages and nationals can get out. That's the right thing to do. We will continue to do everything we can to alleviate the suffering that the Palestinian people are undergoing, and I'm confident that our efforts are already making a big difference on the ground.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Kirklees Council have closed Dewsbury Sports Centre, delivered just 14% of educational healthcare plans within a 20-week target, are unable to deliver a 5-year land supply, just 3 of its many failings, and now they want to introduce extortionate car parking charges, punishing hard-working families and destroying the high street in our towns and villages. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that Labour-run Kirklees Council is no longer fit for purpose?
Mr. Speaker, I share my honourable friend's disappointment with the Labour-run council in Kirklees. Just this week, we saw, I believe, a Labour councillor suspended for anti-Semitism. As he said, they've also closed the Dewsbury Sports Centre and are proposing to increase car parking charges, punishing local businesses and shoppers in the run-up to Christmas. The council is clearly no longer fit for purpose, and local residents deserve better.
Speaker, last week, members from across the House heard testimony from a young Israeli man who lost both of his peace campaigning parents in the October the 7th attack. This morning we heard from Palestinians who have lost generations of families in the south of Gaza because of the military attacks there. This is a question of humanity and morality.
Hear, hear.
The Prime Minister has an opportunity to lead the calls for peace or endorse death, violence and destruction. Which will he choose?
Hear, hear.
Mr. Speaker, I think that's an extremely naive and simplistic way to look at the polls. What he failed to mention in his question was the fact that a proscribed terrorist organisation perpetrated an awful attack on over 1,000 individuals, and Israel has every right to defend itself in those circumstances, and people, their country, would expect nothing less for them to provide security for their citizens. Now, of course, alongside that, they must abide by international law, and we will do everything we can, as I have said, to make sure that aid flows in and provides alleviation to the suffering that the people in Gaza are seeing.
Kevin Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Proposals for a new rail station at Edginswell have been looked forward to for a decade, but a final funding gap exists. Will some of the funds released by the decision to scrap further phases of HS2 be used to resolve this?
Prime Minister.
I can assure my honourable friend that our decision on HS2 means every region of the country will now receive more transport investment than it would have done before, including the South West. I'm pleased that funding is happening to protect the vital rail link between Exeter and Plymouth. There'll be a £2.8 billion road resurfacing fund, and his constituents in the South West will continue to benefit from the £2 bus fare until the end of next year. I know that we have previously provided almost £8 million to progress the station that he mentions, and I'll reassure him that the Rail Minister will have heard his representations and continue to update him on the progress that they're making.
Dixman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. David Cameron was the well-paid
public face of Lex Greensill. Greensill's companies are facing criminal investigations in Switzerland, Germany and here in the UK. David Cameron messaged ministers and officials 62 times over Greensill's COVID loan guarantees. The Treasury Select Committee called this a significant lack of judgment. What does his appointment say about the Prime Minister's own judgment?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as the honourable gentleman knows, the government commissioned Nigel Boardman to review all those issues and strengthen the system following those recommendations. But I'm very confident, Mr. Speaker, that this nation will be well represented by the former Prime Minister abroad. He's a Prime Minister with unrivalled experience of foreign affairs, will help Britain navigate an uncertain world in challenging times. And in contrast, the party opposite would offer to the country a shadow Foreign Secretary who backed his predecessor to be leader, was paid to appear on Russian television, and even voted against Trident. Does that sound like a man who should represent Britain?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The inflation numbers this morning were very welcome, but the tax burden continues to bite. So will the Prime Minister agree in principle with me that the concept of higher rate tax was never meant to drag in police sergeants, Band-Aid nurses, teachers with additional responsibilities and others, and that a priority for his Treasury ministers should be to return fairness to the tax thresholds?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I agree with the honourable gentleman, and I'm pleased that the vast majority of people will continue not to pay the higher rate. I share his ambition to cut taxes for working people. Right now, inflation is falling, and we're sticking to our plan, which is delivering a halving of it this year, because that is the most effective tax cut that we could have delivered for the British people this year, rather than making it worse, as the party opposite would, borrowing money in the way that would be irresponsible and just drive up inflation interest rates. But I want to reassure him that I absolutely share his ambition to cut taxes for working people, and as we stabilise the economy, that's something that both the Chancellor and I are keen to deliver.
JB.
Mr. Speaker, my son loves football, and I understand the Prime Minister is a big Southampton supporter. So after his latest cabinet reshuffle, I wonder if he can tell me, since 2010, have we seen more Southampton managers being sacked, or have we seen more housing ministers come and go? The answer might help to explain why the government is failing so miserably in new home ownership.
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased. I'm pleased that in the last figures that we saw, we had actually a record number of first-time buyers, Mr. Speaker, and we're delivering 1 million homes over this Parliament, as we said, whilst the party opposite blocked our plans to unlock 100,000 homes at the same time. And when it comes to Southampton, I'm also pleased that we're on, I think, almost a 7 or 8 game unbeaten run.
Sir Desmond Swing.
If a two-state solution is to have a chance, Hamas must be defeated, but also there will have to first be a more enlightened policy of administration in the occupied West Bank, mustn't there?
Oh, Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for his question. The UK's long-standing position on the Middle East peace process is very clear. We support a negotiated settlement leading to a safe and secure Israel alongside a viable and sovereign Palestinian state in Gaza and the West Bank. I spoke about this on Monday. Both Israelis and Palestinians have a right to live in peace and security. The longer-term governance of Gaza and security needs to be looked at in the round. It's something that I've discussed repeatedly with President Abbas. We agree with the United States that Gaza should ultimately be under the control of the Palestinian Authority, and we will continue to support President Abbas and his people to get to that outcome.
Mr. Speaker, a new generation of drugs, or can be Simkevi and Kaftrio, is absolutely transforming the lives of patients with cystic fibrosis. So people who would have been waiting for double lung transplants now living happy, healthy lives. But NICE is now saying we can't afford them. So will the Prime Minister and his new Health Secretary get round the table with NICE and with the drugs company to make sure that children being born with cystic fibrosis today get those life-saving drugs in the same way that children currently living with CF are getting them?
Prime Minister. I thank the Honourable Lady for raising an important issue. I'll of course ask the Health Secretary to look into it. She'll understand that NICE operates independently from government, but if there's a conversation that can be had, I'll ensure that it takes place.
David Davis.
The events of the last 6 weeks, can the Prime Minister tell the House why the government has not proscribed the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this government continues to take strong action against Iran, whilst people in the UK and around the world are under threat from the regime. We've sanctioned more than 350 Iranian individuals and entities, including the IRGC in its entirety. The National Security Act of this year implements new measures to protect the British public, including new offences for espionage and foreign interference. And while the government keeps the list of prescribed organisations under review, as members will be aware, it is a long-standing convention that we don't comment on whether a specific organisation is being considered for prescription.
He just said he had unprecedented experience. What would he say was David Cameron's finest foreign policy achievement?
Mr. Speaker, I think there's Mr. Speaker, in fact, many to pick from. But what I would say is, under his leadership, this country hosted what was widely considered to be one of the most successful G8 summits of recent time.
It was great to welcome the Prime Minister to Chelmsford earlier this year, where he launched his antisocial behaviour strategy, and he will be pleased to know that the local police have consistently been stepping up their activities. Last week they arrested 24 people for many crimes, and last night they took out a major significant county lines gang. So please, will he join me in congratulating all those in our local police? And would he like to come back to Chelmsford and come out and patrol? He's very Minister.
Well, it was great to visit my honourable friend and launch the government's antisocial behaviour plan. Can I thank her for raising awareness about the important work that her local policing team is doing, and I'm pleased that they've been empowered by our strategy. Antisocial behaviour does make life miserable for many. That's why our plan being delivered is so important. It's having a difference across the country, including in her part of the world, and I'm pleased to see that crime under this government, in the year that we most recently have data for, has decreased by 56% since 2010.
Okay, Talton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's insulting that in the week that marks 20 years since the abolition of Section 28, the Prime Minister has appointed a minister without portfolio who frequently attacks the LGBTQ+ community with their so-called war on woke, seeks a return to those awful days, denying our human rights and attacking our very existence. Does the Prime Minister agree that he has manifestly and repeatedly failed? It's time for him to resign and to call a general election.
Mr. Speaker, actually, this government and previous have a proud record in championing LGBT rights. It was this government that introduced same-sex marriage, Mr. Speaker, and we will continue to ensure that everyone in our society can live with tolerance and compassion and have every opportunity available for them. That's what we have delivered, and that's what we'll continue delivering.
Neil O'Brien.
Mr. Speaker, last year through the Homes for Ukraine scheme, my family and I welcomed a refugee family to our home. And I'm proud that this country has always offered refuge to those who need it. But it's essential that we in this country decide who comes to this country. The Prime Minister has rightly said that he will do whatever it takes to stop the small boats and the evil trade around them. But isn't it apparent that after this morning's ruling, what it will take is a new law to override the Human Rights Act and to cut through the thicket of case law built up by judicial activism so that we can bring back control of our borders and stop the small boats?
Mr. Speaker, it's right that we go through the judgment carefully and properly, and as I said, the government has already been working in advance on a new treaty with Rwanda to address the concerns that have been raised, that were raised previously and that were raised by the Supreme Court, who also acknowledge that changes can be delivered to address those issues. But as I said, and I'll repeat, if it becomes clear that our domestic legal frameworks, or indeed international conventions, are still frustrating plans after that point, I am prepared to change our laws and revisit those international relationships, because we are absolutely committed to stopping the votes.
John Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, thank you for meeting with my constituent Noam. It has been 40 days since Noam's mum, Ada Sagi, was kidnapped by Hamas on October the 7th. We all condemn Hamas's actions and fight for the return of all hostages. Noam wants the language of love to be louder than the language of hate. 11,000 Palestinians have been killed, over 4,000 of them children. International law is important. Does the Prime Minister agree that you can support Israel but also call out breaches of international law?
Mr. Speaker, I've been consistent from the start that whilst Israel has a right to defend itself, it is important that it complies with international law. It's a point I have made on every meeting or phone conversation that I've had with Prime Minister Netanyahu. And it was a privilege to meet her constituents and to hear the pain that they are going through, which I have enormous sympathy for, which is why we're doing absolutely everything we can to bring hostages home. We're engaged intensively in diplomatic activity in the region and working to get also foreign nationals and British nationals. I'm pleased to say well over 200 have now left Gaza, and we will continue to do everything we can to ensure that everyone can safely leave who needs to.
Holly Bancroft.
The Prime Minister knows I stand unapologetically with my steelmakers in Scunthorpe. And he knows that I believe, as many across this House do, that the UK must retain a virgin steelmaking capability for strategic reasons, if nothing else. Will he reassure the House that he is personally following developments at British Steel and doing all he can to retain what is a vital sovereign capability?
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for the question? I know she is a fantastic champion for her local steelworking community, and I hope she is reassured by the action that this government has already taken to support steelmaking in our country, reaching a landmark agreement with Tata Steel to safeguard thousands of jobs there, and previously in the pandemic as well, because I agree with her, it is important to our industrial base, and we'll continue to have constructive conversations with all those companies to ensure that we can support them in their transition to a cleaner, greener steelmaking future.
Ian Paisley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to the British Independent Retail Association, on a matter that affects every constituency across this kingdom, 82% of retailers don't even bother reporting physical attacks on their staff when they're attacked. It takes shopkeepers to sell an additional 12 items to make up for an item that has been stolen. Will the Prime Minister support efforts that are being made by that association and many others across this House to ensure that retailers are protected, that theft against them is called out, and that they are supported in every way possible? And today at a meeting in Dining Room C, will he encourage those members from those shops in their efforts?
Can I firstly pay tribute to the work that my honourable friend does on this issue as the Vice Chair of the All-Party Group on Retail Crime. He's absolutely right about the importance of this issue. Working in my mum's shop and her pharmacy growing up, I understand exactly what he's talking about when small businesses are the victims of crime. What I can tell him is that our expectation and our agreement with police forces is that all shoplifting should be followed up where there is evidence, such as CCTV footage, which is something that we did earlier this year, and also that any violent or abusive behaviour towards shop workers, particularly those who provide a valuable service to the public, is never acceptable, and that is why we introduced a statutory aggravating factor for assaults on workers that provide a service to the public, and I commend him on everything he's doing on this issue.
Question to William Cash.
Speaker, thank you. Will my right honourable friend give the House an assurance that he has made clear to the new Foreign Secretary, who of course we wish well, that and that he has agreed that his policy and conduct of EU-related affairs will be consistent with the government's 2019 election manifesto and the referendum, and is now fully committed to UK parliamentary sovereignty, self-government and democracy, and in accordance with the government's subsequent legislation.
Prime Minister.
Well, I'm delighted to give my honourable friend that assurance, because this is a government that is seizing the opportunities of Brexit, aided by his advice and support, passing the rule bill, ensuring that we can regulate our growth industries in a more competitive way and sign trade deals with the fastest growing regions across the world, including most recently the CPTPP. It's this government that's delivering the benefits of Brexit to every part of our country, and long may that continue.
That completes Prime Minister's questions. Right, let us begin. I call the Home Secretary to make his statement. Home Secretary, welcome to the dispatch box.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you. And with permission, I would like to make a statement about the government's plan for ending illegal migration. The Supreme Court has today upheld the judgment of the Court of Appeal, meaning that we cannot yet lawfully remove people to Rwanda. The important thing to note is that the judgment of the court today was made on the basis of facts from 15 months ago. The government, of course, fully respects the Supreme Court, but its judgment does not weaken our resolve to deter people from making these illegal, dangerous, and unnecessary journeys. This is a lengthy judgment which we now need to digest and reflect upon. We take our obligations to the courts very seriously, which is why we have already taken action to address a number of the points raised by the lower courts. It is only through breaking the business model of illegal people traffickers that we can fully take control of our borders and save lives at sea. This is why the PM backed our deal with Rwanda, passed legislation to deliver it, and said last December that other countries would follow our lead. And what we have now seen is other countries are indeed now also exploring third country models for illegal migration, including Austria, Germany, Denmark, and Italy in their deal with Albania. A new and innovative model for processing asylum claims. Nothing in the Supreme Court judgment today dims our commitment. The Supreme Court has said that there are issues with Rwanda's asylum system which could create the possibility of someone being returned to a country where they could face persecution. I am struck by the court's remarks about the risk of refoulement. The structural, and I quote, the structural changes and capacity building needed to eliminate that risk may be delivered in the future, but they were not shown to be in place at the time when the lawfulness of this policy had been considered in these proceedings, making reference to the earlier proceedings. We have a plan to provide exactly that certainty. We anticipate that this we anticipated this judgment as a possible result, and for the last few months have been working on a plan to provide the certainty that the court demands. We have been working with Rwanda to build capacity and amend agreements with Rwanda to make clear that those sent there cannot be sent to another country than the UK. Our intention is to uphold our agreement, to upgrade our agreement to a treaty as soon as possible. That will make it absolutely clear to our courts and to Strasbourg that the risks laid out by the court today have been responded to, will be consistent with international law, and ensure that Parliament is able to scrutinise it. The Prime Minister has said that if our domestic legal framework frustrates our plans, he is prepared to change our laws. But I will inform the House we are not going to put forward proposals simply to manufacture an unnecessary row for political gain. We have a plan to deliver the Rwanda deal. They're not listening, Mr. Speaker, so they might want to listen to this. We have a plan to deliver the Rwanda deal, and we will do whatever it takes to stop the boats. Mr. Speaker, illegal immigration is a huge global challenge, and that challenge is growing. It was a topic that I regularly raised with countries across Europe and around the wider world in my former role as a Foreign Secretary. But, Mr. Speaker, monthly illegal migrant numbers are trending upwards right across Europe, with an exception. Our numbers are falling. Illegal migration is dangerous. It undermines the laws of our country. It is unfair on those who come here legally and on the British people who play by the rules. It must and it will stop. This is a wonderful country. And I recognise that because I have had a chance to see it as others see it from overseas. And inevitably, people aspire to come here. But more people coming here illegally is not fair for those struggling to get GP appointments, those trying to get housing or access to schools, or those people who are living near asylum hotels. The impacts are felt on some of the poorest in our society, and we have a duty to address their concerns. While the Conservative government has taken action to protect our country, the Labour Party has voted time and time again not to protect our borders, over 80 times. Rwanda is ready and willing to help. The UNHCR operates its own refugee scheme in Rwanda, and Rwanda is ready to receive thousands of people, process their claims, give them excellent care, and then support them to integrate into Rwanda. This is an African country full of potential and promise. We have a future-focused and mutually beneficial partnership with them, and we plan to deliver. The Rwanda plan has only ever been one tool in our toolbox. We have a plan to drive down numbers, and our plan is working. Before the Prime Minister launched a 10-point plan in December, the number of people entering the UK illegally in small boats had more than quadrupled. While illegal migration in the rest of Europe continues to rise, crossings to the UK are now down by a third. Mr. Speaker, we are tackling illegal migration at every stage in the journey of a would-be illegal migrant. Our plan is working. Last year, the Prime Minister agreed the largest ever small boats deal with France. We have expanded our joint intelligence cell to deepen intelligence sharing and dismantle the criminal gangs. Cutting-edge surveillance technology is in play, and we have beefed up security infrastructure such as CCTV at key border crossings across the Channel. We have ensured that more French officials and officers patrol French beaches, and they are working closely with UK staff. And so far, in 2023, nearly 22,000 crossing attempts have been prevented because of the close coordination between British and French officials. That means less money that the British taxpayers have to spend on hotels, less profits for the criminal gangs, and fewer people to process. It sends a clear message to the gangs and those who want to cross that we will stop them. As Foreign Secretary, I work closely with my Right Honourable friend, the Immigration Minister, to agree a new deal with Albania, with better data sharing, closer operational working and financial support. And in response to the work that he and I did, the number of Albanian small boat arrivals has fallen by 90%. 90%. so far during 2023, and we have returned over 4,600 people in just 10 months. We also want to make sure it's harder to get into one of those boats in the first place, including reducing the supply of boats. We are targeting the movement of these goods, such as dinghies, such as engines, that are used to facilitate the crossing in order to undermine a key component of the smugglers' business model. And those who do make it through will not be able to stay. We have expedited returns agreements with countries including France, Albania, Turkey and Italy. We have increased the number of illegal working raids by almost 70%. We have cut the asylum legacy backlog by over 59,000 cases. We have freed up hundreds of hotel beds with the use of alternative sites. We have announced the closure of the first 50 asylum hotels, and we have passed the Illegal Migration Act, the most ambitious immigration legislation in decades, which makes clear that the only route to asylum in the UK is via one of the safe and legal routes we have put in place. Anyone who comes to the UK illegally will not be able to stay. They will be removed either to their home country if it is safe or to a third country if it is not. Mr. Speaker, I can assure you that our commitment to ending illegal migration is unwavering. We are a positive outlier in Europe. Our efforts are working. Small boat crossings are down. Our decision-making is faster. We are removing those with no right to be here and taking action against those who are working illegally. We have done deals with multiple countries and will continue to do so. So, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, arrivals down, decisions faster, returns up. We are getting on with the job, and we will do whatever it takes to deliver on our commitment to stop the boats, and I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary. Vivek Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the new Home Secretary to his post. He is the 8th Conservative Home Secretary in 8 years, and what a mess he has inherited. The court conclusions today are damning. It exposes the complete failure of the Prime Minister's flagship Rwanda policy, exposes a complete failure of the Prime Minister's judgment in making it the central part of his policy, and the complete failure of Conservatives to get the most basic grip of their boats and asylum chaos. No serious plan on the dangerous boat crossings that are undermining our border security and putting lives at risk that all of us want to see end. No serious plan to sort out the chaos in the asylum system, people in costly asylum hotels because of the soaring backlog that should be ended, and the readiness to spend over £140 million of taxpayers' money on this plan, money we can't get back now that this policy has totally failed. And it adds to the disastrous judgment of the Prime Minister not just appointing and backing the previous Home Secretary, who was unfit for the job. Now, I don't agree with pretty much anything his predecessor as Home Secretary ever said, but she was right on this message to the Prime Minister. She said, if we lose in the Supreme Court, you will have wasted a year and an Act of Parliament only to arrive back at square one. Your magical thinking has meant you have failed to prepare any sort of credible Plan B. Wasting time, wasting money and letting the country down. That is the Conservatives' record. Now, the court outlines the catalogue of problems with the policy, but ministers knew all about them. When it was first announced 18 months ago, I raised in this House the problems with the Israel-Rwanda deal. They were warned many times about failures and weaknesses in the Rwanda asylum system, but they just pressed on. And even if it had been found lawful today, they've admitted it would only have covered a few hundred people anyway, at a time when 100,000 people applied for asylum in the UK last year on the Conservatives' watch, and that would have also cost around twice as much per person as deciding cases in the UK. The truth is the government has wasted not just 1 but 5 years of failing to deal with this. 5 years ago there were just a few hundred people crossing in boats, but they let criminal gangs take hold along the channel. They let asylum decisions collapse, so the backlog soared, and there are now 20% more people in asylum hotels than there were when the Prime Minister promised to end them. So will he now tell us How much in total has the government spent on this failed Rwanda plan so far? The House has a right to know. Yes, he says he wants a new treaty. How much more will that cost? And the court judgment says, despite his optimism, it says of the changes that are needed, the Rwandan government indicated that the contemplated arrangements might not be straightforward to implement in practice. And the court says the provision of resources does not mean that the problems we have described can be resolved in the short term. So again, more of the magical thinking. And what does this mean for the Prime Minister's flagship legislation? Because he boasted about passing it only yesterday, but the government hasn't actually commenced the central clauses of the law, because without Rwanda, and frankly even with Rwanda, the policy doesn't work and will just lead to an endless, ever-increasing permanent backlog. So can he confirm now he won't in fact be implementing the central tenets of that law this year? And can he confirm that this means the Prime Minister's pledges to introduce the new law, to stop the boats and to also to end hotel use will all be broken this year? And why will he not put that money into a proper plan to tackle the boats? I don't believe the new Home Secretary ever believed in the Rwanda plan. He distanced himself from it and his predecessor's language on it. He may even, on occasion, have privately called it batshit. But he and I agree. We need action to stop boat crossings that are undermining border security and putting lives at risk. We need a properly controlled and managed system for asylum and refugees. So let's concentrate on the things that can work. We support the work with France along the northern coast. We want it to go further. We support the work with Albania, with other countries across Europe to tackle the gangs, but it is frankly far, far too weak. We need a proper, comprehensive, massively scaled up plan to go after the criminal gangs and a proper system to clear the backlog, to have a proper returns unit in place so we can end hotel use. And instead of that cost going up from £6 million to £8 million a day on his watch, let us end hotel use and save the taxpayer £2 billion. That should be common ground. So I could suggest to him that he stops wasting taxpayers' money on more failing schemes, that he ditches the magical thinking and the culture wars of his predecessors, and that he ditches the gimmicks and finally gets a grip.
Home Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I think one of the dangers of writing a critique of government policy before you've read the facts laid out in the statement is the statement makes the critique obsolete. She talks about hotel usage, which I might remind the House is coming down. She talks about small boat arrivals in the UK, which I will remind the House are coming down. She talks about closer working relationships with our European partners, which I will remind the House we are already doing. I've written here in response to the various questions, does she have a plan? Does Labour have a plan? And Mr. Speaker, if the benches opposite could curb their enthusiasm and listen to what I was about to say next, I was going to concede that it's clear they do have a plan. And their plan, their great idea, is to do what the government is already doing. Mr. Speaker, which is why we are bucking the European trend when other countries are seeing 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 100% increases in their illegal arrivals. We are seeing a third reduction in ours, bucking the trend. We have always said, Rwanda and the deterrent effect of the Rwanda plan is an important tool in our toolbox. We have never claimed it was the only tool in our toolbox. We have pursued, and when I say we, I of course mean my right honourable friend, the Immigration Minister, with me watching him from King Charles Street, but the collective we is appropriate here. We have always pursued a range of options, and as I set out in my statement, those activities are having an effect. And Mr. Speaker, my final point, the mask has slipped. The mask has slipped because the glee that I detect on the other benches for this temporary setback on the delivery of this plan displays what we on our side of the House know to be true. They don't want migration control to work. They don't want to take control of their own borders. They would rather delegate it to anybody else.
Just sorry. I want to hear the Home Secretary. I don't need the front bench. You may pull your face. The bottom line is I want to hear it quietly, because our people also at home, our constituents wants to hear it. When you're chunnering so loud, they cannot. Home Secretary.
Indeed.
In which case, Theresa May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I first of all welcome my right honourable friend to his new position? The Home Office is a great Department of State, and I hope he will enjoy his time there as much as I enjoyed my time as Home Secretary. Can I ask my right honourable friend to confirm that the judgment that the Supreme Court made today was not contingent on the ECHR? Indeed, the fundamental judgment was made regardless of the ECHR.
Mr. Speaker, I pay tribute to my right honourable friend and predecessor. She was a fantastic and long-served Home Secretary. I intend to try and compete with her on both of those metrics. But she makes an incredibly important point. We look very closely at the judgment. The judgment draws our attention to work that we can do, working with our partners in Rwanda, to address the court's concerns about people being returned to unsafe countries. That is where we will address our focus, because that will be the pathway to ensuring that Rwanda stays a key element of our basket of responses to illegal migration. She was right.
No. Alison Thulus, SNP spokesperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We on these benches were very glad to see the unanimous decision of the Supreme Court today, and it really is quite ridiculous for the new Home Secretary to come here today to tell us that his predecessor's dream will never die. It's gone. Give it up. Do something else instead. And before the extremists on his own benches start to blame the European Convention on Human Rights, the Supreme Court Judge Lord Reid was very clear that it's not just about the ECHR, it's about the Refugee Convention, it's about the UN Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhumane or degrading treatment or punishment, it's about the UN International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, as well as our own domestic legislation in this place. The Supreme Court made clear that Rwanda is not a safe country. At the very heart of the judgment today is the principle of non-refoulement, which means that people must not be sent back into harm's way. And the UNHCR provided very compelling evidence of Rwanda doing so, even after they signed the Memorandum of Understanding with the UK, as well as in their earlier deal with Israel. They pointed out that they had rejected claims from countries such as Syria, Yemen and Afghanistan. Absolutely ludicrous that those claims could be rejected. And it also pointed to the lack of integrity in Rwanda's own systems. It is a serious problem, one that the Minister claims today that he wants to fix, but he should focus his attentions instead on fixing his own department's multiple failings. So what now for the Illegal Migration Act and for the people who will be left in immigration limbo now without any recourse to claiming asylum? This incompetent Tory government can't yeet them back to Rwanda and it won't process their claims. So what happens to this group of people? Mr. Speaker, the solution to this does not lie in puncturing the market in rubber dinghies. It is in creating functioning, safe and legal routes. In the first half of this year, the largest group in small boats were Afghans. Afghans, proof positive that the schemes that the government claims exist just aren't working. Mr. Speaker, many people make these dangerous journeys because they have no other options. This remains the reality, whoever the Home Secretary is. So I ask, when will he stop wasting public money chasing fantasies? Around £1.4 million at least on just the legal challenges, never mind the rest of this incompetent scheme. When will he create a system which treats the world's most vulnerable with the dignity and respect that they are due to build their lives here in the UK? The Immigration Minister hasn't even given Glasgow's MPs the meeting he promised to discuss the people that they are about to make homeless through their bulk processing. So I ask him, if he will not do his responsibilities, take his responsibilities seriously on immigration, on refugees, will he at least allow Scotland to have the right to do so, because we want to welcome people to the world?
Home Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, on the honourable lady's final point, if Scotland wants, in practice, if the Scottish Government, not the Scottish people, if the Scottish Government wants, in practical terms, to be more generous to people seeking refuge here, they can do so. They can do so. In my experience, they choose not to. With regard to the work that we are doing, in my statement, I made clear the various work strands that we are doing in close cooperation with countries around the world to address all elements of the illegal migration pipeline, including the interrupting the logistics around this evil practice, and it is working. It is working, and I draw her attention to the fact that many other countries around Europe, countries that we have close working relationships with, are seeing significant increase in their illegal arrivals, in stark contrast to the reductions that we are seeing here in the UK. And she talks about a number of things, but ultimately I'm drawn to the remarks that the court made about refoulement, and it says that structural changes in capacity building needed to eliminate the risk of refoulement may be delivered in the future, and that is exactly what we are seeking to address.
Okay. Dame Priti Patel.
Mr. Speaker, can I welcome my right honourable friend and neighbour from Essex to the great position of Home Secretary, and I wish him well in all his endeavours on this incredible and very incredibly difficult issue. He's actually just touched on the whole issue with regards to the Supreme Court's decision on refoulement. And their judgment was clear on this issue today, but it's not new, and it has been raised earlier on this year in the Court of Appeal. And if I may say so, Madam Deputy Speaker, ministers have had the opportunity to address some of these practical measures and means thus far prior to today's judgment. So can I please urge the Home Secretary to take every necessary step and measure to work with the government of Rwanda on the practical and operational delivery of this policy around the Economic and Migration Partnership, to give all those assurances, because this partnership is absolutely clear, is integral to making sure that we can break that model, the business model, of stopping the evil trade of people smuggling. And if we can address this principle, this will go a long way to bringing in this essential deterrent in the illegal migration battle.
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my right honourable friend, my long-standing friend, my right honourable friend and predecessor, is absolutely right in the point that she is making. We will break the people smuggling gangs. We will undermine their business model. We will pursue all the various work streams that she will be familiar with from her time in this fantastic office. And in parallel to that, just as she has suggested, we will work, indeed we are already working in response to the comments made by the lower courts. We are already working to address the issues that were raised by judges in lower courts to ensure that we can prove what they need to see, which is that we will remove the risk of refoulement.
Chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, Dame Diana Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I congratulate the right honourable gentleman on his new role. This morning at the Home Affairs Select Committee, David Neal, the Independent Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration, told us that the biggest challenge facing the Home Office is being professional, maintaining objectivity, being fair and understanding human rights. The Inspector also said that what keeps him up at night is the question of who is protecting our borders, and are they doing that to the best of our collective abilities. I just wondered, could the Home Secretary just tell us whether today's ruling on Rwanda proves or disproves
Mr Neil's concerns?
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this government is responsible for protection of this country, and it's a role and responsibility we take incredibly seriously. It is the primary function of governments. And in this statement and in the other statements that I intend to make and the ministers and the department will make from the dispatch box, we will show the House and the country that we take on this side of the House this responsibility incredibly seriously, and we will take whatever action is necessary to ensure the protection of the people of this country and the borders of this country. It would be helpful, frankly, if the party opposite would break the habit seemingly of a lifetime and actually once in a while vote to support the actions that we take.
Sir Robert Neil.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As well as welcoming my right honourable friend most warmly to this post, something where his and my former London Assembly constituents in Bexley and Bromley are massively proud to see him, may I congratulate him upon the tone and the manner of his statement. Because it is right as a law or as a rule of law country that we respect the decisions of the courts, however they go. The Supreme Court was asked a legal question and it gave a legal answer. Does he agree that it's quite clear that this decision is essentially fact-specific, applied to well-established legal principles, and the solution is, first of all, to look at the way in which those facts can be rectified to make it compliant?
Home Secretary.
My honourable friend, my long-standing friend and former South East London representative is absolutely right. Their lordships told us what we need to do to address their concerns. We intend to do what they said needs to be done. We will address their concerns. We will operationalise this plan. We will break the business model, and we will stop the votes.
Ben Bradshaw.
Speaker, 2% of those claiming asylum in this country are LGBTQI+ people fleeing countries where just being themselves can be a death sentence. Does he agree with his predecessor that they're pretending?
If the honourable gentleman wants to know my views on things, he can ask me my views on things rather than ask me to comment on other people's views.
Tim Lawton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the new Home Secretary to his place as well and share his disappointment at the judgment this morning? As we've heard, the Supreme Court focused on the principle of non-refoulement, and hopefully that can be addressed in a new treaty and perhaps will be made more robust if we can work jointly with other European partners who have expressed an interest in a Rwanda-type scheme. But can I ask him, why was this not considered in the original Rwanda treaty, and which law officer was responsible for giving legal advice to the Home Office about how it might stand up to challenge in the court?
Which former law?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable gentleman knows that government legal advice is for informing the decision-making of ministers. It's not appropriate, and we will not discuss government legal advice at the dispatch box. He knows that. The point is, of course, we do always prepare for a range of eventualities. As I said in my statement, we recognise that this was one of the decisions that might come from the court. We listened carefully to the statements made by the judges at the lower court, and we have already started to take action in response to the concerns that they have raised.
Alistair Carmichael.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I also welcome the new Home Secretary to the dispatch box? He's got a difficult job, but it's in everyone's interest that it should be done well. Can I also welcome that part of his statement where he says, "We are not going to put forward proposals simply to manufacture an unnecessary row for short-term political gain." That much, at least, will be a refreshing change. But he should be aware that his honourable friend, the member for Ashfield, the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, is reported as having told ITV that the Prime Minister should ignore the laws following the Supreme Court decision. Will he dissociate himself from these comments?
Home Secretary.
The government, this country, prides itself on being a law-abiding country. So to hear the government's position on things, listen to the statements of government ministers. I have made it clear. We respect the judgment. We respect the judgment. We listen carefully to the comments made by their lordships and, of course, the lower courts. We will respond. Indeed, as I say, we are already responding to the comments they make to make sure that the actions that we take when the Rwanda scheme is operationalised are in strict accordance with international law.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Will the Home Secretary explain to those of us who are not experts in this area why it is that people who arrive illegally on our shores from a safe nearby country cannot immediately be returned to that safe nearby country? Clearly it would be in breach of certain laws, so can he set out perhaps in a statement what those laws might be?
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, receiving countries have got to consent. That is at the nub of this, and which is why it is so very important that the ministers of the department, particularly the immigration minister, has spent so much time working with those countries from whom we have traditionally received illegal migration, including France, but others, most notably in terms of the statistics, Albania, where we have developed an excellent working relationship. And this is where I will claim a bit of credit, because my right honourable friend, the immigration minister, and I had something of a tag team with the government in Tirana. And we are seeing the success that comes about from pragmatic but determined relationships with European partners and others. And I pay tribute to my right honourable friend for that work.
Sir Chris Bryant.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I too warmly welcome the Minister to his post, not least because I know people in the Foreign Office who were rather sad to see him go. However, can I try that question again? What does he think about the 2% of people who claim asylum on the basis of their sexuality because they face massive persecution and death threats in their own country? Does he think that they're pretending to be lesbian, gay or bisexual? And if he does, will he provide the evidence for that?
Home Secretary.
He will know. You can't prove a negative. That's a fallacy. The point is that in my former role, and I thank him for the kind words he said about my time as Foreign Secretary, he will know, because he's clearly got a mole inside my old organisation, he will know how passionately I pursued the rights of LGBT people around the world, including having some very, very difficult conversations where necessary. I absolutely want to make sure that those people are protected, but we should also recognise that bad people hide amongst good people. Sometimes people lie to take advantage of the goodwill of others. The point is it's nonsense to suggest that everybody who is suffering from persecution or claiming to suffer persecution because of their sexuality is lying, and I certainly would never say that, but we do need to make sure, as we do with any process, as we do with any system, we need to make sure that people aren't attempting to abuse the process, because it limits our ability to help those who genuinely are in need. And I recognise that the LBGT, what did I say? LGBT. He knows what I mean. He knows what I mean. Do face genuine persecution around the world. Do face genuine persecution around the world. We do want to support and help them.
Kevin Foster.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And listening to a lot of the Supreme Court judgment earlier today, it was encouraging, particularly around the actual principle of what we're looking to do with Rwanda being lawful, and yet again a High Court endorsing that. But of course, as was touched on earlier, a lot of this turned on the facts, and in particular the facts relating to refoulement, i.e. the transfer to another country that may see those transferred to Rwanda returned to a country where they would face persecution. So can I test him on what work he is doing with, we look at, for example, the Home Office's decision-making capability to help Rwanda build up its decision-making capability, and also what we may be doing with our own judiciary to look at working with Rwanda's judiciary to address some of the Supreme Court's points on that area.
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I pay tribute to my right honourable friend, he should deserve to be right honourable friend, because I know that he did a lot of the work on this very subject, and it goes to the heart of how we operationalise the Rwanda plan, because their lordships set out exactly the point he raised, and it is about capacity building. It is about professionalising their system. I've had exchanges this morning with my Rwandan opposite number, who I've met before. The Rwandans are keen partners to build and strengthen their institutional structures. They see us as a key partner in achieving that, and together we will work to operationalise this. And as I say, I pay tribute to the work he did on this very issue.
Joanna Cherry.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Supreme Court's judgment has put paid to the lazy, ill-informed argument that it's the European Convention on Human Rights, and only the European Convention on Human Rights, that's blocking this government from dealing effectively with asylum and immigration. His government has spent 2 years formulating a policy that's proven incompatible with a multitude of international treaties to which the UK has signed up, and numerous provisions of our domestic law. And the Supreme Court were very clear about that. So my question for the Home Secretary is, when is he going to explain to his backbenchers that the UK government's response to this judgment must be to produce a humane asylum policy that works, not an effort to try and overcome the vital checks and balances of the rule of law and human rights law that stymie bad policy decisions and protect human rights?
Madam Speaker, our immigration policies, as I said, laid out by the figures that I ran through in my statement, is having the positive effect that we committed to. We are bringing down small boat numbers, we are bringing down the need for hotel places, etc., etc. And I've said in my statement that their lordships have set out the route to successfully operationalising the Rwanda scheme. It is through addressing those concerns about refoulement. We will focus on what we need to achieve to unlock this. We recognise that this is a constant battle against criminals. And just with all constant battles against criminals, we focus on what's effective and what's right. The lordships have set out exactly what that is, and that's what we will focus on.
Sir Ian Duncan-Smith.
Madam Speaker, can I welcome my right honourable friend genuinely to his place in the dispatch box. A believer in speaking softly and carrying a big stick is always a very good way of behaving. Can I say to him that... no reference. Can I just say to him that I also fully agree with all of his intentions and the direction of travel that he wants to go to settle this issue in terms of proper organisation such that these concerns are therefore dealt with in the courts. And I do say to him, does he not agree with me, those who greet this judgment with glee need to remember that people are dying in the Channel trying to cross in the boats. But I ask him to ask his right honourable friend, the attorney, at some point to come to the dispatch box in due course to reflect on the judgment, because it does appear to me that this is much wider than the migration judgment, because we're now linking directly to applicability in UK law agreements that were made with the UN that were never bound into UK law. Now, whether one wants it or not, that does widen the whole issue of what then becomes justiciable. I'd be grateful if she would then come at some point and deal with that issue.
Home Secretary.
I once again thank my right honourable friend for his kind words, and my focus in this role is making sure the department is highly effective in protecting the British people and protecting our borders. It's not about trying to look tough, it's about trying to deliver for the British people, and that will be my relentless focus. The Attorney General, my right honourable friend, reminds me that her advice, like all very good in-house lawyers, is limited to the client, which is Her Majesty's government. But I have no doubt that I can persuade her to meet in a private basis with my right honourable friend.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I want to welcome the Home Secretary to his new role. I'm sure he would want to join with me expressing gratitude to all those in our public services who came here as refugees and make such a fantastic contribution to our country. At the heart of this case are a series of asylum seekers, one of whom I know has been confirmed as a victim of trafficking. He's been stuck in an asylum hotel since May 2022. As yet, the government has not even begun to look at his claim for asylum. So can the Home Secretary tell us when his department will actually begin to process the claims of these people and actually get on with finding out whether or not they are illegal asylum seekers, or is he just going to continue with the charade that he can make Rwanda workable?
Secretary.
I don't have details of the individual case that she raises, so I can't comment on the specifics of that. But I will remind her and the House that as part of the Prime Minister's 10-point plan, reducing or eliminating that historic backlog of case files was a commitment. At the start of this process, it stood at 91,000, and it has now been reduced to less than 30,000. So we are delivering. So we are delivering on our commitment to work through that backlog of cases. It was one of the areas. It was one of the areas that we committed to. We are delivering on it, and we will pursue all the elements of our plan.
I would urge colleagues to be brief in their questions so that the Home Secretary can be brief in return, because we have a very packed agenda today and I want to make every effort to get everyone in. Sir Simon Clarke.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I should add my own congratulations to the Home Secretary on his new role. The key word, it seems to me, is time today, because we cannot keep relitigating this question to achieve what seems to be an ever-moving target in terms of what the courts want us to achieve. Our constituents sent us here with a very clear message to sort the small boats issue. Parliament has passed legislation to sort this issue. Can my right honourable friend be specific as to the point at which the attempts by the government to recondition the agreement with Rwanda into treaty form will elapse, and a notwithstanding clause of the kind that my honourable friend from Harborough has set out will become the only tool by which we can actually ensure that the will of this House takes effect, because we cannot allow this cycle to continue indefinitely.
I did just say brief. I'll just remind people of that. Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I listened very carefully to my right honourable friend's comments. We are absolutely determined to maintain the deterrent effect of the Rwanda scheme. To an extent, it is already demonstrating utility by the fact that we know, anecdotally, and I'm not going to over-interpret these figures, that we know the fear of this as part of our arsenal is already having a deterrent effect, which is exactly what it was designed to do. National governments can't just vote themselves out of international commitments, and they are things I recognise as a former Foreign Secretary are incredibly powerful tools as we try and do good around the wider world. But I give him this commitment. We remain relentlessly focused on making sure that we continue to drive down these small boat crossings using the full range of capabilities at our disposal.
Sammy Wilson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Secretary of State is right to prioritise, the government's right to prioritise illegal immigration and ending it as a priority. However, in his statement today, I think I counted 6 times he talked about having a plan. The only word he left out of that was a cunning plan, because his plan seemed to be as workable, effective and chaotic as Baldrick would have suggested in the Blackadder series. But it's no laughing matter, because whilst the plans are not working, there's still pressure on our infrastructure. There's still criminal gangs profiting from people's misery, and and people who use illegal routes are being disadvantaged. Will the Secretary of State give us a commitment that if the European Court of Human Rights continues to be a barrier to the will of this House, that the government will take action and will ignore the demands of the Human Rights Court?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable gentleman I have a huge amount of respect for. He knows that. I know he believes that. one of the points that I took from the judgment today is it's not just about the ECHR. Their lordships set out a number of international commitments that we have made, but they also set out what we need to do to get the Rwanda plan up and running, and it's on a very specific legal point, which we are already in the process of addressing. And I would respectfully disagree with him, because small boat arrivals are down as opposed to almost everywhere else in Europe where they are significantly up. The use of hotel bed spaces is down because of the arrangements that we have put in place. The speed of processing has increased, and the volume of processing of asylum claims has significantly increased. So there are always multiple strands to this plan, as set out in the 10 points that my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, put forward, and they are having the desired effect, and we will just keep working to deliver on our commitments.
Damien Green.
Deputy Speaker, does my right honourable friend agree that one of the glories of our parliamentary democracy is that governments have to obey the law the same way that individual citizens or corporations have to obey the law? And does he also agree that those looking at the judgment carefully, thinking that there is a simple one lever to pull solution, are going to be disappointed?
Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm going to quote a very wise woman, Georgia Maloney, who herself is quoting an even more wise woman, Margaret Thatcher, is that this is a constant battle. This is a constant battle, and in that battle, both domestically and internationally, one of the real strengths, and I saw this as Foreign Secretary, one of our real strengths on the international stage is that when we speak, when we demand other countries abide by the rule of law, we are taken seriously because of our posture on this. And we will continue to ensure that we abide by the rule of law, while simultaneously, and we have proven we can do both, while simultaneously delivering on the commitments we made to drive down illegal migration and stop the boats.
Chiomora.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would like to welcome the Home Secretary to his new position. 1/5 of my constituency casework comes from his new department, and it is a catalogue of human misery. Just one very brief example from the hundreds I could give. Asylum application made December 2020. Interview November 2022, still waiting for a decision, has 2 young children, has twice attempted suicide, a huge cost to them, the NHS and the police. Will he just get a grip and stop making magical thinking and just fix his department and the asylum process?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I completely sympathise with the frustration that her constituent must feel, and it's reflected in the frustration that I detect in her question. But I remind her and the House that we never claimed that the Rwanda deal was the totality of our response to this issue. We made a commitment to increase the speed of decision making and drive down the backlog, and we have demonstrably done that.
Dr. Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituents are disappointed by the judgment today, but will be heartened by the government's commitment to stop the boats. But they're impatient. As the government threatens to take over RAF Scampton, they're impatient the boats are stopped as soon as possible. I understand his plan is to upgrade the treaty with Rwanda. Can he advise the House how long will that take? Will that be potentially subject to legal challenge? And if so, how long could those legal challenges take?
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm not able to give certainty on timelines. I wish that I could, but she will know. She will know that I have a constituency interest in getting this right. RAF Wethersfield, in my own constituency, is being used as a refugee, as an asylum centre. In my conversations in the constituency capacity with my right honourable friend, we discussed the need to drive down the demand for accommodation, whether it be at Scampton, whether it be Wethersfield, or indeed anywhere else. The best way of closing down Wethersfield, not needing Scampton, is to stop the boats, and we are relentlessly focused on doing so. And indeed, my honourable friend understands we are relentlessly focused on doing so for all the reasons I've discussed earlier.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the Home Secretary to his position, and I also welcome the court judgment this morning. But what I noticed in his statement was a complete lack of empathy as to why people seek asylum in the first place, why people risk their lives and risk everything to try and cross a dangerous channel to get to what they hope to be a place of safety. He's right to confirm that there is a global rise in the number of refugees, massively. Shouldn't all governments be working together to address the causes of that, the poverty, the wars, the human rights abuses, and all of those issues? And will he confirm that this country will not walk away from the very important advances made over the last decades by the existence of the European Court of Human Rights to improve human rights, not perfect, but improve them all across Europe, including in this country?
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Right Honourable Gentleman tempts me to refer back to my previous role as Foreign Secretary, and I can assure him and the House that a huge part of the work that is done by the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office are on exactly those issues, addressing climate change so that rural farmers in the developing world have crops that they can grow, sell and eat, reducing the risk of conflict, of persecution. We are addressing the drivers, but the idea that somehow we can uninvent illegal migration, I have to say to the Right Honourable Gentleman, is naive beyond belief. So we do have to also address the fact that people are abused by criminals, they are used as a product to smuggle, and we have to break the business model of the people smugglers, as well as addressing the issues that drive people away from the countries that they originated.
David Jones.
Speaker, may I add my voice to the general welcome to my right honourable friend. He's told the House that his department had anticipated the decision of the Supreme Court that was announced today. That being the case, can he tell the House if he's made an assessment as to whether legislation will be necessary in order to remedy the problems that have been identified? And if so, when would he anticipate being in a position to introduce that legislation?
Home Secretary.
I can assure my right honourable friend that as a thoughtful and proactive department, the Home Office, and I can't claim credit for this because much of this work was done before my arrival, but of course the department looks seriously at the range of potential outcomes from this judgment. We've already set in place the work to turn the MOU into a treaty, thus by addressing some of the concerns of their lordships. And the Prime Minister and I have both made it clear that if there needs to be legislative work domestically in order to ensure we do this, we are unafraid of putting that forward.
Clive Efford.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I know from my recent visit to Culve School that they will welcome their former pupil to his new role, as I do. Can I urge him to resist calls from people on his own benches to remove us from the Convention on Human Rights? Because if we were to do so, a serious criminal or someone who means us harm, such as a terrorist, so someone suspected of terrorism, who seeks to hide overseas, could legitimately claim that their human rights could be violated if they were extradited back to the UK if we were outside of that convention. How is that taking back control of our borders?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank the honourable gentleman, and I'll take the opportunity to go back to my old school and get their congratulations directly at some point in the future. I'll let him know, of course, that I'll be treading in his hallowed turf. Well, the point is, he invites me to be distracted, and I refuse to be distracted. I will focus on what we need to do to achieve it. Their lordships in their judgment set out the route to operationalising the Rwanda scheme, the Rwanda plan. I'm going to focus on what they have told us will resolve the sticking point in this. There was much in this judgment to be welcomed, including, of course, all the other elements about the fundamental soundness of this policy. Will focus on the thing that will unlock the operationalisation of this plan.
Sir Edward Lee.
But how long will this Rwanda treaty take?
to actually get through? How long will it take to have the court case, get a judgment, and the whole thing crawled over again by human rights lawyers? Meanwhile, my right honourable friend is a victim of all this in his constituency at Wethersfield, as I am in RAF Scampton, our failure to stop the boats. Now, he's a thoroughly nice chap. I feel that he feels my pain. And therefore, once this court case over Scampton is decided in the next week or two, will he meet with me so that we can work together to get up to £300 million worth of levelling up at Scampton, whatever the result of that court case?
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm always delighted to meet my honourable friend. He will know that, of course, I'm now in a position where I have to be careful in terms of the commitments I make, certainly about RAF Wethersfield. I do not intend to abuse my position as Home Secretary, but what I am absolutely committed to do is to drive down the need for RAF Scampton, RAF Wethersfield, just as we have driven down the need for hotel accommodation. I am absolutely committed to that, but of course I will meet him.
We do need to speed up if we're going to get everybody in. Claire Hanna.
Warmly welcome the Minister to his new role. The UK is absolutely entitled to create bespoke policy, and he referred to his constructive work with Albania. But does he understand, unlike his predecessor, that policy must be compatible with facts and the law, that it should focus on the chaotic processing he has inherited and funding the public services that he says are under pressure? And can I confirm that he also acknowledges that the ECHR is a fundamental cornerstone of the Good Friday Agreement, and that abandoning it would not be compatible with the government's commitment to Northern Ireland?
Home Secretary.
Once again, the honourable lady has asked me to comment on something in parallel to the things that I set out, but my commitment to her and the House is we are going to focus on the things which will unlock this strand of our work. I can give her, I can't give her, or indeed anyone else in the House, guarantees of timescales, but we are already being effective on processing, on driving down the need for hotel accommodation, on speeding up the decision making, all of which are part of the basket of activities which are helping us be a positive outlier when compared with our European partners.
Sir William Cash.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There is a lot of tinkering going on here. Actually, the real problem is parliamentary sovereignty, and the rule of law, which my honourable friend referred to, is at the heart of this. If the law is clear and express and used in notwithstanding provision, it will deal with all the matters, as I did in an amendment a few years ago. The further point, if I may say, before the Attorney General jumps in, is to say that if we get the law right, we can then deal with what is effectively an international problem, and at the same time distinguish between economic illegal migrants and the proper refugees.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I would caution the House grasping for silver bullet solutions. Sometimes the most effective government policy is just focus and graft. And I can assure the House, the Home Office, the ministers within it and the officials will be relentlessly focused on just the daily work that needs to be done to address this issue. We, of course, will look at what changes we need to make to operationalise the Rwanda scheme, but I would urge against people grasping for silver bullet solutions. They rarely are effective.
Kerry McCarthy.
The Rwanda scheme is callous, inhumane and ineffective. One might say the same about the former Home Secretary, and that's why I welcome the new Home Secretary to his post on the grounds that he couldn't possibly be any worse. I hope that he will consider the ethical dimension of this. The court has just ruled that Rwanda is not a safe country. But even if he doesn't he simply agree that it is not workable, it is not a good use of money, it will take a huge amount of effort to get to a place when anyone gets sent to Rwanda? Aren't there much better ways of pursuing this issue and destroying the small boats model?
Home Secretary.
Again, it's easy to criticise. It's easy to criticise ineffectually, and this is what I sadly hear from opposition benches far too often. No credible alternatives, just criticism. And the point is, we are pursuing a number of work streams which are already proving to be effective, which is why our numbers are going down at a time when almost all, indeed all of our European partners, are seeing illegal arrivals going up. So, we will continue working on multiple strands. We will continue pursuing the Rwanda plan, and at a point in time when the Labour benches finally decide to vote for something rather than against something, we will listen. But that day hasn't happened yet, and I am not suspecting it's going to happen anytime soon.
Let's get briefer. David Simmons.
Deputy Speaker, I warmly welcome the tone and the content of my right honourable friend's statement. Does he agree with me that in addition to the commitment to the ECHR, which is very much treasured by the settled refugee communities in my constituency, that this is an opportunity to reinvigorate the work with France, which has done so much to bear down on those numbers of small boat crossings in the way that he has described?
Home Secretary.
I can assure him and the House that we are doing extensive work with France. I once again pay tribute to my right honourable friend, the Immigration Minister, and it is working. This is the point, it is working, and therefore we will continue to pursue it.
Chris Stevens.
Deputy Speaker, could the Home Secretary please answer the question from Honourable Friend for Glasgow Central? When are we going to get a meeting of Glasgow MPs with the Home Office to discuss those successful refugees who have been granted status? And can he say more widely what discussions he's having with local authorities across the UK on rehousing successful refugees?
Home Secretary.
My understanding is the officials from my department meet regularly on these issues. If there are specific cases, please bring them to my attention.
Neil O'Brien.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome my honourable friend to his place, and I welcome his comments on the unfairness of illegal immigration for those who have come here legally. But the Supreme Court's verdict this morning is extremely comprehensive and reveals not just one obstacle but multiple obstacles to deporting people from this country. And if we want to deter the small boats, we need to be able to remove significant numbers of people extremely quickly. Given the comprehensive nature of this judgment this morning, can I encourage my right honourable friend against an incremental approach? It's clear from this ruling that we need to do something stronger now. We chose in the IMA not to take notwithstanding provisions. I think we do need them now.
Secretary.
I hear the point he makes about a powerful deterrent. We are absolutely committed to that. But I do say again, there are, in circumstances challenging as this, there are very rarely, and in my whole time in government and in politics, I've never once yet come across a silver bullet solution. We have to pursue all our lines of effort, and I give him my assurance we will continue to do so.
Hal Williams.
Madam Deputy Speaker, wouldn't the money wasted on the Rwanda plan have been more usefully spent on massively improving the application process to reduce illegal immigration and establishing safe and legal routes to reduce the number of small boats?
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm wondering whether the microphones are working. There has been a tenfold increase in the pace of asylum processing this last year. We are increasing it. They are not mutually exclusive. We are doing all of them.
Graham.
Madam Deputy Speaker, great to have the Home Secretary in his new role and to hear his confirmation that small boat arrivals are down not just by a fifth but now by a third, and his confirmation to find a treaty to resolve the remaining legal issues on the Rwanda deal. Will my right honourable friend also encourage his officials to share the data on asylum applications that are over a year old, so that with members of Parliament, so that we can prepare with our local councils housing solutions in advance?
Secretary.
I will absolutely take that idea on board. We want to do everything we can to make sure this process is as quick and as smooth as possible.
Hannah Bardell.
Thank you. The European Convention was developed to ensure that governments would never again dehumanise and abuse people's rights with impunity. So can the Secretary of State tell us, does the threat of revisiting international relationships really mean his government are ready to unpick international relationships and treaties, including the ECHR, so they can demonise with impunity those fleeing persecution and conflict? Because we say never again.
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, members have asked me the same question over and over again, and I hate doing this, but I will refer the Honourable Lady to the answer I gave some moments ago.
Consent.
Deputy Speaker, I welcome my right honourable friend to his new role, and I agree with him. Today we saw the opposition mask slip. They have no wish to tackle this, but that's not surprising when their policy is to pass the numbers decision to the Leader of the Opposition's mothership in Brussels. My constituents are absolutely fed up, and they want, could he speak directly to them and address their concerns? Nothing will be off the table to get this sorted quickly.
The benches opposite are devoid of ideas. They criticise, but they put nothing forward. Their best plan is to do a list of things that we are already doing, but objecting to other things that we are going to add to that basket of tools. That is why I can reassure her and her constituents we, unlike them, will remain focused on serving the British people, stopping the boats.
Stephen Farry.
Thank you. Back to the issue of the European Convention on Human Rights. So the Home Secretary has not been clear on this point. Does he recognise that if the UK was to renounce the Convention or tamper with it, it would undermine the Good Friday Agreement, particularly around human rights and policing and justice? It would also undermine the policing and justice cooperation aspect of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement and leave the UK in the company of Belarus and Russia.
Home Secretary.
I'm well aware of the implications of the European Court of Human Rights. I keep being invited to comment on something rather than the text in my statement. I have made it clear the government's position that we are focusing our attention on what we believe will unlock this important strand of a multi-strand approach to illegal migration.
Bob Seeley.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Deputy Speaker. He'll agree that the control of our borders is a defining issue for millions of people. So when the Prime Minister says, if necessary, I am prepared to revisit our domestic legal framework, could we sharpen that up a bit to say we will revisit our domestic legal framework and we will do so on multiple fronts in a timely way?
Secretary.
Well, we are focused on delivering for the British people, delivering quickly. As I say, we've always had a multi-strand approach, and we will make sure that the domestic legislative framework is fit for purpose and will ensure that we can deliver on our commitment to stopping the boats.
Patrick Grady.
Madam Deputy Speaker, when and how will he know that his treaties and legislative changes are giving the court the certainty that it demands? Is he going to proactively go to the court for a fresh ruling, or is he going to wait for third-party challenges and the litigation merry-go-round to continue?
Secretary.
I'm not going to set out all the plans for how we will put this in place. We have already started the process for turning the MOU into a treaty. We are focused on addressing the specific issues raised by their lordships.
Nick Fletcher.
Madam Deputy Speaker, in addition to voting against the government 70 times with regards to stopping the boats, the opposition also speak of natural dispersal when dealing with economic migrants. This means they often end up in Doncaster, where property is cheaper rather than in the leafy suburbs of the Liberal elites. But Doncaster is full. So will the Home Secretary do everything he can to put the Rwanda Treaty through as soon as possible?
Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome the point that raised by my honourable friend. It is often the least well-off communities who feel the burden most heavily, and it is our duty to them to address these issues, and I give him the commitment on my recent trip to just outside his constituency, weighing over the border and getting his name wrong, for which I apologise. That I will do exactly that.
Okay. Anne McLaughlin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This morning I met with a British Palestinian woman called Wafia. She told me that 30 members of her family have died in the last month in Gaza. She told me about her cousins who so far survived but are utterly traumatised and completely terrified. Now, should those cousins and their children somehow make it to these shores, albeit on the only route given to them by this government, i.e. the dangerous small boats crossings, is he seriously telling me he could look these people in the eye and tell them not only will they not be joining Wafia, but they'll be going to Rwanda, which is his eventual plan, and they will never be reunited with what remains of their family?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm not going to be drawn on making comments on specific individuals without knowing the circumstances. It would be ridiculous for anyone in the House to try and do immigration processing across the dispatch box like that. Of course, I recognise, I've seen the pain and suffering that the Palestinian people in Gaza are experiencing. We have got family reconciliation schemes as part of our safe legal routes, but I'm not going to make specific comments on individual cases, and the reason why I won't is obvious to anyone who gives it any thought.
Gullis.
Mr Speaker, the people of Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Tork want to know clear and simply, as well as looking at our legal framework here in the United Kingdom, will the Home Secretary be willing to disapply international treaties and conventions such as the ECHR and Refugee Convention in order to take back control of our borders, yes or no?
I don't believe those things are necessary, but the point is our focus. We remain focused on what we need to do. And I've said a number of times there are no silver bullets. This requires constant work, constant vigilance, constant effort, and I commit him and I commit to the whole House. That's exactly what we'll continue to do.
Brown.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. According to the Home Office's own figures, it will cost £63,000 more to transport a vulnerable human being to Rwanda rather than let them stay in the UK. So if the government was to scrap this unlawful, inhumane and cruel policy, how much money would that save the taxpayers?
Home Secretary.
I don't agree. I don't agree with those numbers because ultimately, no, I don't agree with his interpretation of those numbers because ultimately it fails to take into consideration the cost to human lives, of not deterring people, putting their lives into the hands of criminals, putting their lives at risk on the open seas in small, dangerous dinghies. And he should be conscious that deterring this evil trade is a human good and something that we should be pursued. I'm amazed that he looks at it purely in pounds, shillings and pence and not in the cost to human life.
French.
Will friend agree that it's classic Labour double standards that they appear to support the United Nations sending people to Rwanda but don't support the British government doing the same?
A friend of every country except their own, I think.
Thank you. The Home Secretary is clearly under a lot of pressure from his backbenchers on this, but can I remind him that ECHR is entwined throughout many years of devolved Parliament's legislation and indeed Scottish case law. So what assurances can he give that his government will not attempt to weaken or change the ECHR without consent from devolved administrations?
Home Secretary.
Well, with regard to amendments, when I was Foreign Secretary, I made the point that if you want to preserve institutions, they need to evolve. So nothing should be caught in aspic or frozen in amber. But ultimately, once again, she asks me to be distracted from our core effort, which is delivering on our multi-strand approach to attacking illegal migration. I refuse to do so.
Greg Smith.
Speaker, I very much welcome my honourable friend to his position and the clear determination he has shown in stopping the boats. However, speed is the metric by which our constituents will judge us. So once the dust has settled on the judgment, and it's clear whether we need a notwithstanding provision or other legislation, will he bring it to this House with the same speed that we brought things like the Coronavirus Act through so that we can shut down this evil trade of people smuggling?
My honourable friend makes an important point. My commitment, which is absolutely echoed by the Prime Minister, is that we will, of course, look at our domestic legislative framework. We will take action. We have passed one of the most ambitious pieces of legislation. We are unafraid to do so. This is core. This is core to the lives of the British people and their confidence in the security of their country, and it is actually core to our mission as a government.
Stuart C. MacDonald.
Madam Speaker, what the Home Secretary is ultimately arguing for is a system whereby rich Western countries get to pack off asylum seekers and refugees to poorer countries that already bear a vastly disproportionate share of responsibility for sheltering refugees around the world. There is zero evidence that this will work. An abundance of evidence of the harm that it does to the individuals caught up in it. Isn't the point that it's not just illegal, but it's immoral and impracticable?
Secretary.
So what would he do, Madam Speaker? What would he do? Would he just say that every person in the world is a big place and there are lots of people in it? Is he credibly just saying that anybody choosing to come here by any means, including through the hands of evil criminals, should automatically have the right to? It is an untenable position. We are addressing poverty and conflict in the developing world. We are addressing climate change, which is affecting farmers in the developing world. We are doing all those things, but we are also discharging our duty to the British people to protect their borders. And if he doesn't feel that is a function of government, then he is wrong.
Tom Hunt.
Deputy Speaker, 18th of May 2020, the first time I raised this issue in this place. The Rwanda scheme was stuck in the courts for 18 months. Enough is enough. Does the Home Secretary agree with me that in his basket of tools, one of those tools needs to be a deterrent that is robust, and the timescales do matter? I've had enough, and all of my constituents have had enough. This is a matter of critical importance. Does the Home Secretary agree with me?
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I would remind him that we are already seeing success, and that is accelerating because of the measures that we have put in place. He is absolutely right. He is absolutely right. We do need a deterrent for people making those dangerous crossings and a deterrent to the illegal criminals. We are determined to deliver that, and we will do so in the face of the opposition who are desperately trying to prevent us from doing so.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I very much hope the measures that my right honourable friend has set out will allow us to deliver Rwanda as soon as possible. But will my right honourable friend also look, as I've asked for on a number of occasions, other third countries that we could form partnerships with to deliver more processing overseas in a number of those other locations?
Secretary.
So I can assure my honourable friend that in addition to the conversations that are well progressed with Rwanda, we are having similar conversations with a number of other countries, and indeed our policy is now being adopted in large part by a number of other European countries whose circumstances are considerably worse than ours. We are absolutely leading the field on this issue.
Anna Firth. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I warmly welcome my fellow Essex colleagues to his place and wish him every success. I welcome his commitment to a tough but fair policy on immigration. The people of Southend are particularly concerned that if we do not resolve the issue of illegal migration, we're preventing people who have served our country from coming here legally to safety. Does he agree? Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and a number of people have said about the humanity of this. It should be the elected government of a country who decides who can and cannot come to the country. It should not be criminals. It should not be smugglers. It should not be people who prey upon the weak, because that would be the byproduct of a failure to address this. And this is what we see from the opposition, a complete vacuum where policy should live. And that vacuum encourages illegality and criminality. That is what we're seeking to address.
Brendan Clark-Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I welcome the Home Secretary to his place and thank him for the outstanding job he did in his previous brief. But Rwanda is a country we do business with. It is a country with a thriving economy, and it is a country the leader of the opposition's football team even promotes as a tourist destination. So, bearing this in mind, could the government consider whether it may be appropriate to add Rwanda to the list of safe countries?
My honourable friend makes a very good point, and one of the few things that the former leader of the opposition and I share is a passion for Arsenal Football Club. But the point is, Rwanda is a country which is developing fast. It is a close partner. They listen carefully when we talk to them and work with them, and I have no doubt that working closely with them, we will bring this scheme into operation and put forward that deterrent, which will be a really important strand of the multi-strand approach we have to illegal migration.
Scott Benton.
I welcome the steady progress being made to close asylum hotels. I'm extremely disappointed that the Metropole in Blackpool has yet to be vacated. This hotel is located in the poorest ward in the entire country, bar none, and the pressure on my local community and public services is absolutely immense. Is the Home Secretary able to give me an assurance that in the next batch of hotel closures, socio-economic conditions will be taken into account and the Metropole will finally be closed?
Secretary.
I listen very carefully to the points he makes, and he reinforces the issue, which I think is absolutely key. It is very, very easy for people to be generous of spirit when it's someone else bearing the burden. And the people in his constituency, the people in the immediate neighbourhood of the Metropole Hotel, as he said, are not wealthy people, and they are the ones disproportionately bearing the brunt of illegal migration, which is why we are absolutely committed to help them and the other people like them around the country by getting a grip of this evil trade and stopping the boats.
I thank the Home Secretary for his statement. Point of order, Dawn Butler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, it has recently come to light that a Conservative donor firm has been awarded £11.5 million contract to supply RAC-affected schools with temporary classrooms. David Wernick of Wernick Buildings Limited, Tory councillor, previously chairman of the Conservative Association, has donated £71,000 to the Tories and has won government contracts with a combined total of £20 million. I wish I could say it shocks me, Madam Deputy Speaker, but given this government's record It does not. On the 5th of September, I asked a written question to the Department of Education asking very specifically for details of the porter cabin providers they contracted to provide this temporary accommodation. I stated clearly that I wanted the names of the firms contracted. In the reply, the member for Wantage, on behalf of the department, failed to provide a substantive and specific answer to my specific question. It is not acceptable, Madam Deputy Speaker, for ministers to reply with obfuscation and avoidance, and I am increasingly concerned that this is becoming the norm in response to parliamentary questions. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I seek your advice on how members can ensure that in future we get clear, concise and correct responses from the government.
Well, I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for giving me notice of her point of order. As I'm sure she knows, the Chair is not responsible for the content of answers to parliamentary questions. Mr. Speaker has always made clear that he does want as much transparency and accuracy as possible. The Honourable Lady is fortunate that I believe the Minister would like to make a further, raise a further point of order to that point of order. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was just going to respond to say that I don't know anything about the first point, but on the second point about the companies, I'll ask my Honourable friend, the Schools Minister, to write to her and explain which companies are doing that.
Thank you. Okay, so I think basically the Minister has said he's going to provide some further information. I'm sure that if the Honourable Lady does not find that satisfactory, she will come back. But if she wishes to make a further point of order...
Just very quickly, I thank the Minister for that response. If he could please provide whether there was any competition before the award of the contract, that would be really useful. Thank you, Madam Deputy.
Okay, I suggest what we don't do at this point is to get into too many details about what is going to be in this response. But I think we've started the ball rolling, so we will await that information to be supplied to the Honourable Lady. And the Treasury bench will have heard what I said about accuracy and transparency. Thank you. Thank you. We'll leave it at that. Order, order. I have an announcement to make about the election of the chair of the Backbench Business Committee. Nominations closed at 1 p.m. for the position of chair of the Backbench Business Committee. Only one nomination has been received, so there will not be a ballot. I congratulate Ian Mearns on his re-election. Thank you. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
King's Speech. Motion for an address. Adjourned debate on question. Now.
I inform the House that Mr. Speaker has selected Amendment R in the name of the Leader of the Opposition, which will be moved at the start of the debate, and Amendments H in the name of Stephen Flynn, the Leader of the SNP, and K in the name of Sir Ed Davey, which will be moved at the end of the debate. Sir Ed Davey, Leader of the Liberal Democrats. The question is that an humble address be presented to His Majesty as on the order paper. Colleagues will know that there is significant interest in the debate, so they should expect a very early time limit, if not immediate. That is likely to be 5 minutes. So I want to give warning of that so people can adjust their speeches accordingly, or if they don't wish to speak, to let me know. Question is that an humble address be presented to His Majesty as on the order paper. I call Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper to move Amendment R.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. When the Prime Minister opened the King's Speech debate just 8 days ago, we had all this briefing about how it was a Rishi reset moment. So much of a flop was it that having made promises just 8 days ago about the changes his government would deliver, now he's talking about the changes to his government instead. Another reshuffle, another Rishi reset, not change, just more of the same chaos. We remember his conference claim that he was rejecting decades of failure, including the last 13 years of Tory government. And just a month later, he's brought back one of the main Tory architects, the former Prime Minister who cut 20,000 police officers, brought in the bedroom tax and austerity, pushed working families and children into poverty, and it is a sign of the state of the Tory party that the Prime Minister who did all that is now suddenly seen as a moderate. And instead of a government focused on the problems facing the country, the cost of living crisis, record NHS waiting lists, rising town centre crime and serious violence, what we've got from them is just more of the same Tory psychodrama and chaos. Because in the last 7.5 years, we've had 5 Prime Ministers, 6 Chancellors, 7 Health Secretaries, 7 Foreign Secretaries, 8 Home Secretaries, and I think I counted right. 11 eight Justice Secretaries. It has been a struggle to keep count of the changing Justice Secretaries. 8 Home Secretaries in less than 8 years, and even worse, 2 of them were the Right Honourable Member for Fareham. So unsuited for the job of Home Secretary, she was sacked twice. Once for breaching security rules in government, the second time for undermining security on our streets, attacking the police and undermining respect for decisions they take in the run-up to a difficult weekend, ramping up division around remembrance and making it harder for the police to do their job. Things no other Home Secretary would ever have done. And it shows how little this Prime Minister cares about our security at all, that he was prepared to reappoint her, to defend her and to follow her wherever she led, and now we know why. Because the dodgy deal he denied last year is now laid bare in the former Home Secretary's letter. Here's what she says. Despite you having been rejected by a majority of party members and thus having no personal mandate to be Prime Minister, fair point there, this was a document with clear terms to which you agreed in October 2022 during your second leadership campaign. I trusted you. Well, obviously another sign of her poor judgment. A deal that made him Prime Minister and made him make her the most unsuitable Home Secretary this country has had. And so, Mr. Speaker, when the Conservatives published their latest Crime and Justice Bill, which has measures in it to tackle antisocial behaviour that Labour called for, I was going to make the point that they've no ideas of their own and they are just following Labour's lead. But I have to concede, members opposite, in fact the Tory party in general, are definitely the experts on antisocial behaviour. The former Home Secretary is throwing rocks and stones. The new Conservative group is making dark threats, going round the parliamentary Tory party, nuisance begging for no confidence letters in the Prime Minister. And the member for South Holland and the Deepings, so desperate to find out how many have gone into the chair of the 1922 committee, he's now camped outside his office. But look, I guess they told us that was a lifestyle choice. And while they fight culture wars with each other, the rest of us are worried about the security on our streets. And the new Home Secretary has said that he briefed that he didn't want to take over this job, but he's agreed to take one for the team. So let me just say to him and to all of their front bench, if he and their ministers don't want to be running the Home Office, don't want to be Justice, running the Justice Department and can't see how to do the job, they should get out the way and let those of us who can. Because our country is crying out for a government that actually cares about tackling crime, restoring security to our streets and restoring confidence in the police, rather than a government, Tory government, just chasing headlines and fighting amongst themselves. They want to tell us that all's fine on the number of police, on the level of crime, but they're badly out of touch because that's not what it feels like across the country, and nothing in this speech will touch the sides. We've got 10,000 fewer neighbourhood police on our streets. Half the country say they never see a bobby on the beat. Knife crime up by 70%, devastating young lives. Persistent violence against women and girls across our country. And that is the Conservatives' abysmal legacy on law and order. So Labour has set out a mission on crime to halve serious violence, including knife crime and violence against women and girls, to reverse the catastrophic collapse in the proportion of crimes solved, to rebuild confidence in the police and criminal justice system, getting 13,000 more neighbourhood police on the streets and tackling town centre crime. But what do we have in the King's speech? The Crime and Justice Bill includes measures Labour called for long ago, but it doesn't tackle enough of the serious problems our country faces or make up for the damage that's been done. We support making sure that the most serious and dangerous criminals properly serve their time, but frankly, too few criminals are actually caught or charged in the first place. Under this government, more than 90% of crimes go unsolved. And if you commit a crime in this country, the chances of you being caught and punished are less than half what they were under the last Labour government. That is the scale of collapse in law and order under the Tories. So on knife crime, the measures go nowhere near far enough. On violence against women and girls, I'm really concerned. Nothing on spiking, nothing serious on stalking, nothing to turn around the woeful fact that 98% of rapists avoid charge. And the government's sentencing proposals may mean that thousands of domestic abusers whose violence is escalating may actually be let off jail. And there is nothing at all on town centre crime. Shoplifting is up a shocking 25% in a year. Assaults on shop workers tripled during the pandemic and haven't gone down again. This week is Freedom